Okay team, so now we are going to do a hands-on for designing and implementing a data science. So now we'll be starting the fourth hands-on, which is run experiments. I opened this link here. So run experiments, what we are going to do here, experiments are the core of a data scientist work. Okay, in Azure Machine Learning, an experiment is used to run a script or a pipeline, which we created earlier in our third session in the designer. Now, and usually generate outputs and records metrics. So when we run this experiment, it will generate some outputs and also some metadata or matrices, based on which we can see the prediction, regression, or anything as a part of our data science experiment. Now, you will use the Azure Machine Learning SDK or software development kit to run Python codes as experiment. So this we will be doing through Jupyter Notebook. It's an inbuilt, you can say IDE, where we can write our Python script, run it, and also save those results as a notebooks, okay, of our experiment. So before that, we have to create machine learning workspace and then clone the notebooks required for this exercise. This is part of our first experiment, hands-on itself. Okay, so that we have already done, and here you can see under this compute resource, I have cloned my hands-on notebooks from GitHub. Okay, if you have not done, you have to follow this first hands-on to get it created. Okay, now moving on. Once all the notebooks are cloned, we have to create a compute instance and then start it so that it would be in running state. Okay, that is part of our second hands-on. Use automated machine learning. Okay, or I think in Azure Machine Learning Workspace, you check which one. So that we have already completed. And then if you see here, this my compute instance is running. That you can go here and click plus new button and select the instructions mentioned here. Okay, under this create Azure Machine Learning Workspace, and you can create your compute resource. And once the compute resource is up and running or started, if you want, you can stop it by selecting this and stop this. Currently we are going to run Jupyter Notebook, so I will open this Jupyter application under this compute VM, okay, or compute resource. In the Jupyter Notebook environment, create a new terminal. This will open up a new tab with a command prompt. Okay, I jumped here. First of all, when the compute instance is running, open this Jupyter link, okay, in a new browser tab. Okay, so that's what we are going to do here. So this is going to open a Jupyter Notebook in a new tab. Here you can see a Jupyter instance is running, right? And these are some quick tutorials to run automated machine learning, Azure Synapses, deployment. There are so many things you can check. Okay, I'll just minimize this. Okay, so under the users, I see all my folders and the notebooks, right, which I have cloned. Now we need to verify whether the Azure Machine Learning Software Development Kit is installed or not. So for that, follow these steps. What we have to do, the Azure Notebook environment, create a new terminal. So here we'll create a new terminal. So it's taking me to this path. Okay. Now enter the following command to verify whether Azure ML SDK is installed. Azure Machine Learning SDK is installed or not. So I copied this command and I'll paste and run it here. So I can see Azure Machine Learning SDK is installed and the version is this, and what it does, used to build and run machine learning workflows upon the Azure Machine Learning service. If you want to learn more about that, you can visit this documentation offered from Microsoft Corporation. Okay. Now, what it has is Azure Training AutoML Client for Azure ML Dataset Runtime, Azure ML Pipeline. So all these things are required to run our code. Now, so we have verified our SDK is installed. Now what we have to do? Azure ML SDK provides most important libraries to work with Azure Machine Learning, right? There are some additional packages that contain other useful libraries not included in the SDK. So use the following command to verify widget package. Okay. So first I'll copy that. Okay. And then I'll again paste it here and see whether this other libraries are also installed. So widget version is also 1.3.36.0, that is also installed. What it has is Azure ML Telemetry, IPython widget, Azure ML Core, and Azure Storage Blob to work with the data storage. So all these extra libraries are required to work with this one. Fine. Now we have checked Azure ML SDK and Azure ML widget. Both are installed, okay, in our virtual machine environment. Now, to run the experiment in Azure Machine Learning, we need a control layer, right? Often a script or program, okay, to work with. Now, in the Jupyter homepage, browse to this folder where you clone the notebook and open the run experiment notebook. So now we have to go to the run experiment notebook. So I'll go to Jupyter homepage, and this is my, under this users, I have this user. Under that I have this machine learning project with all the notebook. I will open this run experiment notebook. So here we can see it's the run experiment notebook with which we will use to connect to workspace and then run our experiments. So here we are importing Azure ML core components and then workspace, and then load the workspace from the saved configuration file. So this is a configuration file. It's referring a workspace configuration file to load and work within that ML workspace. Okay. Basically we are trying to load under which workspace we are going to run our experiment. Okay. Now, one of the most fundamental tasks that data scientists need to perform is to create and run experiment to analyze and process and analyze the data. You will learn how to use an Azure ML experiment to run Python code and record values extracted from data. Okay, this all having a description of how we are going to run an experiment on diabetes dataset. Okay, next we'll be exploring the data, extracting statistics, doing some visualization and data sampling. All these things we'll be doing in the Python scripting, and then we'll be running those scripts. So here if you see, we are importing experiment from this core library of Azure ML. We are also importing pandas library for data frame and other things, matplot library for plotting a visualization, right, and matplotlib inline to show the visualization in the notebook itself. Now here we are creating the experiment, which is Azure ML experiment under the workspace that we have defined with this name. Now this will run the experiment and also start logging. So start experiment with this experiment name. Okay, this is just to print that experiment has started. We load this diabetes data set from our data folder. So if you're not aware where this data folder is, you go to data folder. Here we have diabetes.csv file with all our data that we earlier worked, right, in other hands-on, previous hands-on. So this is the same data which is under the data folder. It's referring that CSV data file. Now we're loading that data, counting, doing some kind of formatting, all analysis and everything, then plot and log the count of diabetic versus non-diabetic patient. So here we are trying to plot diabetic and non-diabetic patient in the form of a visualization, and that will be shown like this with all the labelings. Patient with diabetes, that will be the heading. X-axis will be having diagnosis and y-axis will be having patient, and then log distinct pregnancy count, log summary statistics from numeric columns. So these are the numeric columns. We'll be logging the summary statistics using this for each for loops, and then those sample data we are creating and uploading to the experiment to run our experiment. Now view run details. This is to view the run details. So here Azure ML widget is nothing but a library, Python library already created to view the run details, okay, within the widget. There are more details shown here, what each of these instructions doing, right? Retrieve experiment details using the SDK. So these are like matrices we want to show up, okay, extra information. You can download the files produced by the experiment. So these are the generated files, output files we can also download from our workspace, okay. Excuse me. So get details with logs. So this will give us all the run details and the logs. This is where we are going to run an script, okay. So in the previous example, you ran an experiment inline in this notebook. A more flexible solution is to create a separate script for the experiment and store it in a folder along with any other files it needs, and then use the Azure ML to run the experiment based on the script in the folder. So this is for automated run, more of a automated run, and keeping the logic separate from the running of this experiment. So any data normalization algorithms, everything will be in a separate script, and then we'll be passing that data to that model, and then doing all kinds of logging and matrices calculation, and then printing that. Okay, so this is a separate code here written, and then we are trying to run that experiment. Now these are all related to the environment, creating the environment maybe for development, unit testing, and production. So based on different environment, if you want to run different experiments, all these details are mentioned here. Log the matrices, get the details and the logs of the run experiment which we are running, and then download all those files as output from our workspace. View experiment run history. This will show us all the run history for that experiment that we have run, all the run history. Machine Learning Flow. Machine Learning Flow is an open source platform for managing machine learning process. It's commonly but not exclusively used in Databricks environment to coordinate experiment track matrices. Okay, in Azure Machine Learning experiment, you can use MLflow to track matrices, and alternative to the native log functionality. Okay, instead of native log functionality, we can use MLflow to track matrices. This is just an alternative to our native log functionality. So how to use that MLflow with an inline experiment? This is all shown here. Importing the experiment, importing the pandas library, importing MLflow, and then writing all the experiment using MLflow to run, and then log all the matrices, or track all the matrices. Okay, so this matrices we are logging. Use MLflow in experiment script. So this is how we can use MLflow within the experiment script. And then MLflow packages. When you use ML tracking in Azure ML experiment script, the MLflow tracking URI is set automatically. When you start the experiment run, with the environment in which the script is to be run must include the required MLflow package. So that package is required to run the tracking, MLflow tracking, and it's referring these configuration files. And then here we are logging the matrices. More on this, I will explain all these matrices, how MLflow is running, all those things in next videos, upcoming videos. Okay, so for now this is all about Azure ML running the experiment through Jupyter Notebook. So let's run this experiment now from top to bottom. Okay, so I'll click this one to restart the kernel and then rerun the whole notebook. So this will restart the kernel and try to run each of the individual cells that and the script that we have written. one by one. You can see ready to use Azure ML with this version and this workspace. This is what the workspace we created, right, for our experiment and doing all kinds of machine learning hands-on. Now we are into the second cell. It's doing all kinds of data loading using pandas library, doing all kinds of experiment and then showing how many diabetic patients we have and non-diabetic patients we have. So 0 indicates non-diabetic patients and 1 indicates diabetic patients. So this is a visualization. That's where matplotlib library comes into picture to plot our bar chart here. Now here you see this widget is printed, right, and it's showing status of our experiment. This run is completed. All these informations are shown. Pregnancy counts. Next, retrieve experiment details using the SDK. So this is showing the matrices based on 10,000 records. Here we have pregnancies, categories, plasma glucose count, mean, standard deviation. All this data is shown here for each of these fields, numeric fields. And these are the files or the outputs. Okay, now these files are downloaded to output sample.csv. So if you go to downloaded files, see these extra folders. Now we can say, right, downloaded files, downloaded logs, diabetes experiment files. So these are downloaded automatically. Diabetes experiment Python file also got downloaded. So all these got downloaded as a part of our matrices and output of the experiments that we have run. So this is our sample CSV used to work. Now these all files downloaded. These are extra logs about the run ID or history, where we have run, it's locally, status completed. All these extra information or metadata or matrices are shown here. Okay, this is the repository name with which we are working. Git branch. It's also committing that experiment that we have run all those code, and I am the user. Now here run an experiment. So again there is a new experiment to run onto this diabetes CSV file. And then here we can see all the logs. Now as I mentioned here you're calling an widget which will show us all the logs, right? So it's kind of debug logs. You can scroll down and see all those logs here, right? So different logs are shown here. This one. Now let's move on. So out of 10,000 patient records, we see these many users are non-diabetic and these many patients are non-diabetic and these many patients are diabetic. And these are the output files that we have. Okay, saved under output logs. Okay, again we see the extra metadata, but this time here we have run on a different file, and this shows all the extra information related to our container where we are running this, about the VM details, nodes, everything, where we are running this experiment. So many information, and this in the tabular form, all the packages that were used to run our experiment. Okay, along with this logs. Those logs are also downloaded to these folders I showed you, right? These are downloaded files. Then we have downloaded logs, Azure logs, ML logs, and then native Azure ML logs. Okay, then here we can see the run history of all the experiments that we have run. Now instead of native logs, now we are using ML flow. So now machine learning flow is another package which we can use to capture matrices. Okay, so now we are again doing the experiment, new experiment with this name. Then here we have a failure list. Experiment gets run out of index out of range. Okay, so this failed. Anyway, let's run this one. Experiment has been completed. Matrices is failing. What if I run this one? ML flow diabetes CSV file. Then run this flow. It's running using this Python script, and this Python script is having all the logics for normalization, doing all kinds of splitting, and then running the flows. Okay, now let's run next one. So now we can see the script is running and completed, right? All the logs again we can see here, and also printed here. Now this logs can be shown here. So let's run this experiment script, and here all the observations involved 10,000 patient records. So this is about how we can run our Azure ML experiments through a Jupyter notebook rather than in the portal. Okay, so this is it for now. Then we'll stop our compute engine so that it will not incur any extra cost, and hopefully you find it useful. Please like and subscribe my videos. See you in next episode. Bye bye.